Good morning, good evening, whoever may be across the nation or around the world. Once again, you are listening to the VMware Communities Roundtable Podcast. This is podcast number 481. My name is Eric Nelson, and with me today, I have my co-host, my regular one, John White. John, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going, Eric? As always, the weekly Color of the Bay report. Less wind today, so is that deep, that green blue? Not so much of the upwelling of the mud. It was actually miserable because it was 90 degrees in the middle of the day. Not happy right now. I don't get the Bay. 4 years into my move here, I don't understand it. It was 60 degrees, and I was thinking about putting my heating blanket back on my bed 3 weeks ago. Yeah. Do not understand.
Peaked out at 102 in Palo Alto, so yeah, we definitely got the warm weather. Careful what you ask for, because we were complaining about the chilly weather and cold, and now it's blistering hot, and yeah, there you go. So on the show today, we have workloads on VMC on AWS with Senior Director Drew Nielsen. Drew, nice to have you in the studio, as always. Good to see you. We're going to be talking to Drew about workloads on VMC and AWS, and can't wait to get into that. Before we do, we should probably just do standard news of the day. Developer Week next week, June 17th through the 20th. We'll be in Brooklyn. If you happen to see us on Facebook Live, hey, Facebook guys, we actually have our lab that we're going to be running in the tables here. It's going to be Kubernetes running on Raspberry Pi. So we have Kubernetes running on Raspberry Pi. We have a master node. Plus we have, I think, 5 or 6 worker nodes here. We're just prepping for the lab next week in New York. If you happen to be in New York, want free tickets to come see us at Developer World, I think it's Developer Week. We'll be there in Brooklyn, 17th through the 20th, giving away sensors, teaching you how to run Kubernetes on Raspberry Pis, which is kind of fun, and then we will talk about how to run that same workload up on PKS on AWS, so should be interesting. Other things in the news, just the shout-outs. We did get the correct dates, content catalog for VMworld on 06/18 coming up very shortly next week, I believe. Early bird registration ends on 06/21, so get your regs in. Those hotels in San Francisco are a bit pricey, so if you get in there early, you probably will save yourself some money because the hotel blocks are still available. So get there.
To the tune of like $100 a night.
Yeah, we looked at, for instance, the Marriott Marquis. We were looking at trying to book some people in, and Marriott Marquis is charging like $600 a night. Right. Wow. So it's like, now that's not in the VMworld block. That was just an external. We have somebody coming in. Get your early bird registration. Save some money there. It's going to be a great show this year. A lot of interesting stuff. Kubernetes. We're looking at the keynotes. We're getting early exposure to that. It's definitely worth coming. And then San Francisco is just a nice place to have a vacation. Right. It's not like Vegas where you're not going to bring your wife to Vegas and traipse around and it's going to be hot and sweaty and. No, this is San Francisco, beautiful weather, got the water, so,
Yeah, probably not going to be 100 degrees.
Probably not going to be 100, not in San Francisco, no. And the I hear the water down there is just totally turquoise blue at all times, so.
That's what I hear.
Good. Schedule Builder opens on 07/16, so I had that by a month off, so there you go.
Makes sense.
And then Schedule Builder for Europe, 09/24. And obviously the conference is on 08/25, and conference in Europe is 11/04. We are getting all of the European sessions ready as well, so that's keeping us busy. Session announcements went out.
They did?
Yes. Session owners now know that they are going to be doing sessions, so that's been out on social a little bit. Everybody congratulating the people. If you didn't get a session, sorry to hear that, but come to the show anyway. There's going to be a lot of cool stuff that we're going to do. All right, that's all I've got. John, I don't know if you have anything you want to cover?
Yeah, absolutely. I have the VMware user cons that are coming up. June 18th in SoCal, so if you are not registered there, it's down in Long Beach from 8 to 6. Kansas City is coming up at the end of June, June 25th in Overland Park, also 8 to 6 on June 25th. And then early July, Minneapolis VMUG UserCon. July 9th in Minneapolis. Go ahead and check that out. If you're going to be in the areas, always super interesting. Great tracks, great content.
All right, that's great. All right. Get to your VMUGs if you're around, and if not, come to New York. Workloads on VMC and AWS with Senior Director and Workload Product Marketing guy, Drew Nielsen. Drew, how's it going? As always, tell us a little bit about yourself. How long have you been at VMware, and what do you do here? What did you do before you came to VMware? What's the arc of your career? Give us the elevator pitch.
Yep, sure. No, Drew Nielsen. I'm just happy to be here today.
And no relation to Eric Nielsen myself.
No, actually, no, we are not related.
Yeah.
But no, I've been at VMware now for about 10 months. I run workload marketing for the company, so that covers everything from VDI to business critical applications, as well as development frameworks like Kubernetes and DevOps types of things, and AI and machine learning as well. So prior to here, I ran a DevSecOps team for a digital therapeutics company, where we were making mobile applications that were FDA approved to actually deal with things like opioid addiction, combat PTSD, sleep deprivation, and those kind of things. So trying to move people away from the opioid crisis to dealing with it with more of a digital therapeutic.
Oh, interesting.
Oh,
But
neat.
prior to that, I bounced around between product management roles and actually ended up starting my career for a little company called Raytheon, where I was doing applied cryptography and directory services and all types of system management stuff.
So you live in the Bay Area?
Grew up, born and raised in San Francisco. Went to LA for a few years, decided that wasn't working, so I came back and been here ever since, but seem to travel a lot. So
Sure. Yeah, as everybody in Silicon Valley tends to do.
Yeah,
Right? There's
it's-
a lot of work around the globe. Great. So you've been here 10 months. What's your impression?
I love it. I mean, VMware is a great place to be. I mean, it's a company that I've always used the product probably for about the last 10 years. I go back to vSphere 5.0. Did a lot of work in the government space where we were basically taking VMware through various government certifications on converged platforms. So fair amount of experience with the product, and really like the culture here, and it's been really great so far.
Right. My thought is when we came from Sun Microsystems, a couple of guys, Pablo and myself, Pablo runs the labs, came here. The cultural difference was VMware is a yes company, right? Like
Very much so.
everybody just says, sure, yeah, we can do that, right? Where at Sun Microsystems, it was always like there's a committee, you gotta put a document together, you gotta run it by 30 people, then they have a committee vote, you have to respond to all the committee members. It took you a year so they were basically a no company that if you got lucky, you worked your way up to a yes, but you had to it was kind of like a struggle. Where
Yeah.
here, I feel like this is very much a yes company all
Very
over the
much.
place. Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad you experienced that. So why don't you take us through a little bit of workload management and what are you focusing on here at VMware for the last 10 months, and introduce us to the higher level concept, and then we'll drill down into what we offer.
Right. So, traditionally VMware has been very focused on compute, network, and storage. And, one of the things I do, it's really about up-leveling that conversation, because as you look at, as everything is going to hybrid cloud, applications are changing. In the next 5 years, we will create more applications and services than mankind has done in the last 40. And so as we look at things like workload mobility and hybrid cloud and those things, it's really about having a platform that allows you to move your workloads, say from your data center to a managed service provider, maybe to an edge type of scenario, and to a public cloud. And as we look at it, it's really about having a global compute fabric. And that's where VMC on AWS comes in, because we've taken the number one private cloud provider in VMware and married that with the number one infrastructure provider of AWS, and really given the VMware community and our customer base the ability to have that workload mobility across the platforms. So if you really look at a more technical level, between vSphere, NSX, and vSAN, that VCF really sets you up to be able to have that capability. So as you have a lot of cloud-first mandates and the move to the public cloud, we provide you that foundation to be able to do that.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, IT practitioners running, our products in their data center, how much workload activity did they get exposed to on a regular basis? Like, I think we set up the infrastructure and we manage the operating system level. I'm just curious, where does that land?
That's a really good question, because a lot of times when I talk to not only our customers but even to our internal teams, they're like, we're focused on, compute, network, and storage, or what I just call CNS, and that's fine. But if you really look at it, VMware globally runs about 75 to 80 million workloads. So we have more impact on business critical applications, business decisions, business agility than any other platform combined. And, we run virtualized SQL. I mean, I do a lot of work on the SAP application. 80% of SAP workloads that are virtualized on vSphere today.
Right.
SQL is the same, Oracle is the same. I mean, we have this intense breadth of knowledge around the applications. And really, in some ways, we're almost redefining DevOps in a way, if you think about it, because if you look at traditional DevOps tool chains and compared to what we're doing with VMware Cloud Foundation and VMC on AWS, we're really allowing those VI admins to make that transition, but without having to reskill, with having optionality in the cloud with VMC on AWS. There's no lock-in. So, we give them a lot of capabilities
Right.
with that.
Okay, I guess my head tends to be in Kubernetes land, but when we talk about workloads, we're also just talking about traditional workloads, right?
Absolutely.
Where you just have what VMware has been doing for the last 10 years.
Absolutely.
Right. Do they get into now, or are you getting into now, how to figure out where to move that? Because there was never really a move. It was always just virtualize it or don't virtualize it, and that was the big
Right.
question, and taking people through that journey. Now you're kind of taking them through a journey of where to put it.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of journeys there, depending on, the 4 areas that I cover, which is VDI, business critical apps, the development frameworks, and AI/ML. AI/ML is still very much a physical to virtual conversation. With, GPU support that we would have on vSphere and those things, we really make a compelling argument around virtualizing those ML and AI workloads. If you take something like VDI or a business critical app, it's really about, okay, 1, do I have a mandate to go to cloud, which a lot of organizations do? 2, do I want the flexibility of cloud? Because one of the things that VMC on AWS offers is these sort of native cloud services that you won't get in your data center. So like a lot of the customers that I talk to, I was talking to a government agency last week, and they're saying, hey, there's a compelling event coming up with SQL Server 2008. It's going end of life in July. They're saying, hey, we want to migrate all this to cloud, but at the same time, we want to upgrade those applications. And there we're giving prescriptive guidance around, hey, let's migrate first, let's refactor later, let's get into the cloud. You've got a secure infrastructure with AWS. You've got a secure hypervisor platform with vSphere. You can trade some space for time. You've got a couple layers of security, throw in vSphere Platinum on top of that with App Defense. You've locked down the VM so
Right.
tight.
Yeah.
And from there, it's really, what are you looking for? Is it an economics conversation at that point? Is it, you're looking for those new services? Maybe you want to do some consolidation.
I see.
there's
So once they're up in VMware Cloud on AWS, they can make the decision on, say, the database layer and say,
Sure.
well, do we still want to virtualize that and own that, or maybe we want to consume a cloud database service?
Absolutely.
Right. So they can make that decision of like, is this important?
Right.
Is it important for the data to kind of be owned on our metal, even if that's a metal that we're renting, or do we want to completely outsource even the management of cloud scale databases to somebody else?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's probably a security discussion, as well as other things that are relevant to whatever organization is actually making that decision, right?
True, although it's becoming less of a security discussion in the cloud.
Oh, really?
So case in point, I mean, my background is security, so I've been in that space for about 18 years now. And really, if you look at, any of the hyperscaler offerings, they are more secure than anybody's data center on the planet. They go through more security audits, more scrutiny from a whole bunch of different agencies, looking at everything from, say, healthcare to government. They have more looks than anybody's data center. So the whole idea around really to deal with that security conversation in the cloud, that is very quick unless you've lived under a rock for the last 10 years. Any cloud is probably more secure than anybody's data center.
Sure.
End of discussion at that point.
Or a closet in their
in their robo office
Yeah.
somewhere. Yeah, exactly.
absolutely. There's no M16 guard, right? There's no man trap. There's no the wall is made out of plywood that you could hammer through.
Well, it's not an 8-foot thick concrete wall
Right.
somewhere in Virginia.
Yeah.
So you deal with the traditional workloads. Your example you gave was, hey, here's a traditional workload. Don't refactor it. Let's just get it into the cloud in a known state, in a known
Right.
quantity, and then look at how are you gonna change that.
Yeah, and a lot, we hear a lot of the refactoring conversation as part of when you go to cloud, there's like, oh my God, we have to refactor everything. And we've seen some numbers where it costs between about $1 to $2 million an app and about
Right,
18
right.
months to actually do that. But, when you're running on vSphere and the VMware Cloud Foundation, that conversation is non-existent because whatever is running in your data center on VMware today will run in VMC on AWS today as well.
Right.
So really it's more of a, vMotion the app and go from there.
I think the critical number that people always leave out is that it's $1 to $2 million to refactor, 18 months, and 30% failure rate.
I've seen a higher failure rate because
Right,
I've actually
sure.
done it in a previous life,
Okay.
but I'll take your number.
Right.
In your 10 months that you've been here, have you seen some workloads then move successfully? Is that too?
I've seen a number of workloads move successfully.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
question for you, which I know all IT administrators want to know this, right? Like, are we seeing a movement, a shift away from running apps in data centers, right? When people move, are they laying off at IT administrators, or do you see this just expanding capacity?
I see it as two things. One is definitely expanding capacity, but the other piece of it is there is a more app-centric focus. So
Right.
you see a lot of VI admins who were probably a lot more concerned with running on-prem infrastructure before, now are suddenly reshifting their focus and saying, we are very app-centric.
Right.
I mean, I'll go back to my SAP example. SAP is driven by the business and IT essentially delivers it. But I can tell you that every organization, IT organization that runs a successful SAP instance, the business loves them. And that part of that shift to a business-focused app delivery model is really where things are going. The other piece of that is to do that in the cloud takes the compute network and storage off the plate to give those IT people the time to focus on those apps. I mean, I don't see
that's where
I don't see
that's-
layoffs or anything to
no,
your point.
No, but it was kind of a softball question because I knew the answer, but I'm not out in the field either, so
Right.
that was one of the things is to test my own assumption because we do these Kubernetes which are in front of you here, these Raspberry Pis running Kubernetes,
Oh, yeah, no, these things are
to
great.
allow people to start focusing on what does it take to get an app up, running a Docker image going, the app coming from GitHub, just so you can start to learn the vocabulary that
Right.
the modern apps people are actually talking about when they get into refactoring the apps,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Which this shift allows, more resources to be put into app delivery, right?
Yeah,
Where
absolutely.
you can have that dialogue with the business owners who are building next generation apps and do that. And
Right.
it's just a checkbox for me to go, is that really happening? Or is it,
No, it's actually
I'm just actually living in the happy notion. I think there's some psychologists who, I forget the phrases, but it's where you want to believe, so therefore you tell yourself a narrative that this is what's actually happening, but it's just your own narrative. It's not actually happening that way.
I think at least with, when it comes to job skills, like people need to be managing their own careers, right? In order to
Absolutely.
stay relevant as technology changes. And when you're in a technology field, you have to manage your skill set so that it stays relevant. If your job skill is the same as it was in 2004 and it was lifting 4 rack unit computers into a rack, getting it installed, getting the power connected, making sure that the UPS is wired up correctly, and that your top of rack network. If that is your 100% of your job skill, then you need to up level, right, to be more relevant. I mean, like, yes, if you outsource that part of the data center operations and that's 100% of your job skill, then your job is in danger. I mean, we
You
should
have
be
a
honest.
problem, yes.
We should be honest about that.
Yeah.
But like, your job is going to be in danger if you haven't changed your job skill set since 2004, period, right?
No, no, correct. I mean,
In technology.
I can tell you from personal experience watching people, who haven't gone to the cloud. I mean, just, from a career perspective, about 8 years ago, I said, look, I want to go to cloud. And I have some friends who were in the storage business. They stayed in hardware, and now things are a little tougher for them.
Sure.
To your point.
Yeah, it's interesting because going to VMUGs this year, I could see some VMUG, IT administrators were really in on it, and the vibe was very positive, moving forward. Everybody engaged on all types of subjects. And then there were other regions where they were definitely in the what do you call it, the VN. The three acronyms, which is compute,
CNS.
CNS.
yes.
Yeah.
They're embedded in CNS. They're not getting outside of that,
Right.
And you could just sense the different vibe, right?
Yeah, there is.
And maybe it's okay, but I would say that this is something that we're all hitting. And I was saying that before we started recording that when we do VMC on AWS, if you look at our podcast download numbers, like they're double now.
Right.
We get 6,000 when we talk about VMC on AWS, and we get 3,000 a week normally, right? So I think that our audience, our IT audience, is actually responding to this, and it's becoming real for them. So
Yep.
yeah, it is.
It's also another beauty of VMC on AWS. It's giving them that career pathway to the next step.
So I always we have a lot of customers that have opened accounts on VMC on AWS. Then I think this year was how many workloads do we have and what's actually running there. So you've given us a summary of the base workload, right? Database and so forth. What are some of the other ones? What are the other base ones that you've seen looking like they're going to just go there, right? So we can kind of talk workloads for a minute here.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, when you're dealing with things like data center evacuation, that's a compelling event. And so it's really the business critical workloads are definitely top of mind.
Okay.
VDI is another one, but if you want to get really specific, Oracle EBS is one.
Okay.
SAP HANA, SAP NetWeaver, Microsoft SQL Server. I mean, I know I already talked about that, but really that compelling event on July 19th when that thing goes end of life, end of support. That is, I mean, I was on a customer call yesterday who had like 3,000 instances of SQL Server 2008. And they're like, where do we put them? What do we do with them?
Yeah.
That's going to be big. I mean, and there's,
When you
there's
say
a
they're
clock on
going
that.
end of life, is Microsoft not supporting them any longer? Or
Correct.
Yeah. So they're not going to be able to move to cloud. That's not going to really help them, right?
Well,
Is it?
moving to cloud allows them to trade space for time. Because you've got the additional security layers. Because if you look at an unsupported SQL Server instance
Oh, I see.
in your
So
data
it's the
center,
fact that it's unsupported that there's a security
it's
risk.
security vulnerability in your data center.
Right. That's what they mean by unsupported.
So maybe
Yeah.
we
I
could-
missed that. Okay.
Yeah,
no
maybe-
security updates.
Maybe when they're in a full stack environment in VMware, like we have some security rules that we can apply via NSX, maybe out of the box. It says, oh, if you're, because I remember we did this with end of life for data center, like, server 2003.
Right.
Right. It was like, oh, okay, well, lock down your RDS port, lock down this, lock down that, lock down this. And, you can go to your audit committee and say, well, we've mitigated,
Yeah, you've mitigated the risk.
yeah, a bunch of the risks. So.
And so if you look at our stack, I mean, you've got obviously App Defense and vSphere Platinum. You've got all the security controls to your point at NSX. You've got the security features within vSAN. So you've got those three layers as well as what AWS is giving you with their infrastructure security. So you've mitigated a lot of risk at that point.
Right, right. Yeah, that never occurred to me that like you could actually help your security story by going to the cloud.
Yeah, interesting.
Without changing the application at all.
On chat, Graham is mentioning that they are actually moving workloads to Azure because Azure is offering 2 additional years of support for things if you move into their cloud.
Is that fair? I
That's-
don't.
I don't
Somehow
know.
that
That's, like,
feels slimy.
sneaky.
Like,
Yeah.
what if we said, "Oh, by the way, we'll still support vSphere 5.0."
Oh, he says, oh, by the way, it's
Wow.
3 additional years, not 2.
Oh my
Sorry.
goodness!
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
at that point, you're going to have to do some level of refactoring.
Yeah, it's not-
You're going to
yeah,
change your
right,
operations,
right.
and it's great. You'll save a little money up front, but in reality, you've basically just put yourself into another lock-in scenario.
Right, and also giving yourself 3 years of breathing space didn't help this last time because you knew it was coming for 3 years and you didn't do anything.
That's true.
So giving yourself another 3 years, you're putting yourself into, in fact, a worse position, right? 'Cause you need
they
that
roll.
But
much-
I like candy. It tastes good. It's yummy. like,
You're eating the marshmallow today, Eric? Is that
this
it?
is just give me another shot. It's okay.
Not so
I
much.
just need I need a little bit more. Yeah, I went to the dentist yesterday, and I kind of feel that way. Right?
Oh, okay.
The dentist tells you need to floss more, you need to brush more. And I'm like, yeah. When you're there and they're grinding away at stuff, you're like, yep, I'm definitely going to do this. The minute you get out of the dentist, you're like, okay.
Not so much.
I'm free. Yeah.
Do I have a budget for this?
Right.
Dude? Like,
Can I
do I have
actually-
a board level mandate to floss?
Which other projects am I not going to do so I can go do that one? All right, so yeah, we have the standards set, and to your point, you move them over to the cloud. It's a more secure environment.
Right.
It frees up resources to do other things, and like we're all trying, resources are constrained. How do I buy myself some more runway? And I'm always trying to buy runway on different projects, right?
Sure.
Because budget is a constraint.
Yeah. It's so interesting because you mentioned starting out with data center evacuation. It's the use case that, again, to the cloud economics guys last week, it's the thing that we can most easily compare costs to, right?
Correct.
Because you can say, okay, my entire data center or this section of the data center, the capitalization, like all the rent that I'm paying, all the power, all the support on all these computers, it's all going away. My replacement cost for all those things is what I'm comparing VMware Cloud and AWS to. Right. And so it's an easier comparison to say data center evacuation, costs of staying in the data center to costs of going to cloud. But now you're talking about with a security like runway solution, it's a maybe a slightly more subtle way of talking about, cost comparison. Well, in order to do this and stay, we would have to, spend this much money. We'd have to have this much security budget.
And also, to deal with the skill set angle as well.
Right.
I mean, because
Right.
one of the things we went out and looked at, we said, all right, we'll look at Microsoft, we'll look at Google, we'll look at AWS. And there's currently across those three about 8,000 job openings for people with cloud skills. If they can't fill those, our customers are going to have a much harder time filling those gaps. And so with VMC on AWS, you leverage that existing skill set in that cost model.
IT practitioners have a lot of years of expertise.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
You just don't grow them right out of college, right? Somebody was asking me that yesterday. It's like, what should we do for VMworld, right? And I'm like, well, let's look at the audience, look at the
Right.
skill set. These are not 20 to 30-year-olds. These are 30 to 50-year-olds who've spent a lot of time learning a lot of stuff to be able to
Absolutely.
do this. And so, so the ability to take IT practitioners who know are
CNS, Compute Network Storage.
CNS. I like the acronym, and shifting them to re-roll them, but using all that experience is absolutely key because, right, there aren't there aren't resources.
No.
How many job openings?
8,000 across
8,000.
those three that we
Yeah,
found.
right.
But, I was talking to a VI admin probably about a month ago, and he was a VCDX and all the appropriate VMware certifications,
sure.
and he was telling me, he's like, I really like VMC on AWS because it's investment protection for all the time and money and resources that I've spent getting these certificates.
Right. And there's just a ton of features there that are useful. Right. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I know we even now have VMC on AWS certifications as well that they can go out and chase and go that route.
It's interesting. I didn't even think about this until, I don't know, you said something like additional features in VMware Cloud and AWS, or any hyper cloud, that, we partner with. It's the idea that you can have your business critical application like SAP HANA or Oracle or whatever it is that you're using, and if the resource requirements on it spike, then we actually can deliver those resources within 15 minutes.
Yeah,
right?
you have that elasticity.
Right.
Right.
When you're on-prem, you can't do that. You're either compromising performance or you're oversizing. So your budget requirements go for, again, like you're building your highway for rush hour instead of for like steady state.
Exactly.
Right?
And, since VMC is on AWS is as a service, you get that, all the benefits of the cloud to deal with those kind of things.
So, say your business critical app has, peaks that are pretty predictable, end of month, batch jobs that are running. Well, we're within 6 hours of these things kicking off. Okay, well, let's add some infrastructure. Somehow we'll write that into our contract, to get extra resources. It's very predictable. Here's our peaks. We're going to, write a contract so that we can handle those peaks. And then get those resources to go away, at the end of the peak, so we're not paying for it anymore.
Right. Another use case we see, especially like for VDI on Horizon on VMC, is seasonality.
Oh, wow.
So you get a lot of retail. They spin up a bunch of virtual desktops to maybe get through the Christmas season or Black Friday or any type of a big shopping day scenario, and they spin them back down when they're done. Or we see another use case there is like user training. Do you want to go stand up 10 classrooms, provision 100 PCs, bring all that hardware in just for 2 events a year?
Yeah.
Or do you just burst those up in cloud and spin them down when you're done?
We use it for a HOL. So
Right.
our own
Yeah,
HOL
hands on that.
environments, are doing that as well. So it makes sense. So those are the traditional workloads. Now we get into the kind of the newer workloads. Do you guys get into guys that are actually building cloud native apps or other apps? Do you experience any of that? I know we offer PKS as a service, which really isn't VMC on AWS,
Right.
so maybe they don't overlap at all. I know there's some people, I look at it and I go, I tell people, look, when you're looking at doing new apps, just go spin up vSphere, and put containers on it. You have containers in vSphere, and you're right where you want to be anyway.
Yeah,
So,
we see people running Docker on VMC on AWS and VMs. That's a very
Right.
common scenario.
right.
We're
I don't
starting
think
to-
they're mutually exclusive, right? I mean,
No.
and there is absolutely extending your current infrastructure. You've already got a ton of vSphere. You got your IT staff ready. You got security policies, all that. Now you just you extend that out into
Right.
AWS, and now I have greenfield, nice framed resources that I can go build my project, deploy it, and it's on AWS. I get a bill.
And you have access
I'm
to native
happy.
cloud services, and
Right. Right.
you could do distributed apps, and you're happy.
Right, right. Do you see any of those use cases?
Some. We're starting to see more and more of them.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
the primary driver, if you look at where the bulk of the workload's on, and
Right.
if you kind of take like a curve and you say,
Right. Of course. yeah,
you either want fully automated or you want fully customizable. And the customizable piece is the VM. In a VM, you can install your apps, your OS, your libraries. That's still 80% of the workloads. And as you kind of move up that continuum out of the VM space into PKS and those other things, you get more and more automation. So it really depends on where you are in your app development journey per se.
Right.
If you're still in that VM space, then you're fine. If you want to go full-on modern application architecture, we can support you there as well.
So I'll do a little bit of log rolling, Eric.
Okay, sure.
You mentioned VMworld sessions. I had a code session approved.
How did that get through?
Yeah,
I don't know how
know.
that got through. I don't know.
it was
Did you get a full session too?
It was a grind. It was a grind.
Did you get the 30-minute or the 60-minute?
I got the 30.
Oh, you got the 30. All right. Well, I guess we let that one.
So the title is Save the IT Department, Add the Development Platform to Your Portfolio. Right, and the whole idea is that in order to remain relevant as a department or even as a VI admin, what you want to add to your skill set is supporting the application development within the organization, because then you're tied to the revenue that's coming into the company, and everything that you're doing is not about costs to the company, it's about supporting revenue, right?
That's right.
So just getting familiar with those technologies, I think, is critical for I mentioned career development. Find out about it. Come to, if there's going to be a Kubernetes lab that Eric is sponsoring near you, then you should go to that. If you're going to come to VMworld, and it's going to be there, you should do that. You should get familiar.
Now, to do a little bit of log rolling of my own, I have a couple of sessions at VMworld. One is focused on SAP on VMC on AWS. We're also going to be doing workloads on VMC on Dell. So if you want to understand that hybrid cloud vision and story and what that looks like, come on down to VMworld and you can come to those sessions as well.
Awesome.
Anything surprising that you've run into since you've been here that you went, wow, I that's new. I know that's kind of off the cuff here, but any kind of good stories. You've been in this space now that you're surprised at.
When I walked in, the amount of what I would just call uber technical content around workloads that we have is unbelievable. There were hundreds and hundreds of pages of implementation guides and just technical data around how to run workloads that was already here. That was amazing. I mean, you know, God,
We've been at it
there's
since 2006,
No,
so
I
it
mean,
does accumulate.
There's so many stories, though, that I could probably tell here. I mean, just the technical depth of our engineering teams. That is just, I mean, I've worked with some great engineering teams, but the ones I've run into at VMware are phenomenal.
Yeah, when you get into the kernel teams and the ESX
Yeah.
teams and what they're dealing with and how long they've been building out kernel
Right.
infrastructure to optimize to the point where we just lightly say, oh, there's only a 1% penalty, right? But when you think about virtualizing workloads and managing to do that in an operating system with only a 1% difference between
yeah.
native hardware and not, the amount of engineering that goes in there is just crazy.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And the loop thinking they have to think, the recursive code you have to do to be able to make all of that work correct. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, it's been a great ride so far.
They're
Right.
doing so much work to abstract our thinking away from the hardware, but in doing so, they become experts at that hardware, right? And
Absolutely.
And the abstraction that they're presenting is pretty amazing. I mean, I just remember the first time I went to a session that described NUMA, like non-uniform memory access, I think, right? To have to remind myself, oh, that's right, this is something that is something that's tunable, to fit my virtual machine within a NUMA boundary I'm going to be able to get, a little bit of a boost. But it's something that you don't think about because things have been abstracted away, so effectively, and we've, done away with giant, CPU machines, requirements because, we actually are able to examine things and go, no, actually, you're not using more than 2 CPUs. So, why, and then once you're that small, you stop paying attention to things like NUMA boundaries. But then when you're scaling up to larger, business critical workloads, all of a sudden, those things become relevant again. And then it's nice to know that there's this engineering team that's done all this work to, help you with the implementation and pay attention to all those
It's
details.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
So you came from an outside, right? Now you're inside. Any on workload, like now that you've joined the dark side, I guess, or whatever, come from the light to the dark or the dark to the light. What
Behind the curtain.
anything strike you that when you're inside of VMware, the perspective changes versus being a customer?
It feels very much the same for me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Excellent.
I didn't have any kind of like, oh wow, this is totally different. I mean,
Right.
the same when I interacted with VMware when I was on the outside feels very much the same way as when I've been here. I mean, when I was on the outside and we had issues, the SE teams were always very helpful. The account managers, got stuff done. I wouldn't.
Good. That's actually a great thing because that means we're
transparent.
transparent enough that,
Yeah,
that what you interact with is pretty much what you've got when you're here.
Yeah,
Right,
I mean,
right.
The
Yeah.
10 months is usually when you start to get your arms around the organizational structure. I would say that was about when I understood, here's what all the different business units are. And the very last business unit that was ever created at VMware, like what it does and where it
Right.
fits. And then, in those intervening 10 months, we've purchased 3 companies, and you have to go back and figure out where they fit
Yep.
within those organizational
Absolutely.
I got another statement on chat, which I'll just read. Most apps in SMB space aren't cloud native or even cloud ready, for that matter. So
Correct.
That's I guess one of the themes would be how much of what you're experiencing isn't even close to being cloud ready, and then is it a journey just to what do you do in those situations?
That's probably 70 to 80% of the workloads that I see. I mean, and really, if you, to whoever the commenter
Yeah, Graham, you can.
to Graham's point, I mean, a lot of the business critical apps that we run into, they are not cloud native by any stretch,
Right.
which is really the benefit of being able to take those non-native apps and put them right into cloud without the refactoring. And, it's really migrate and then refactor if you want, but if you just want to migrate them, go ahead.
Yeah,
Just
right.
move them and you're in the cloud.
Easy to do. So you've mentioned that you have sessions at VMworld. Are you out on the road? Do you meet customers? Do they send you around? You say you travel a lot. I don't know if that was before we recorded, but we started recording. But what are your objectives throughout the rest of the year? What does your job look like, and what are you trying to do? And how can the community help you?
Well, I mean, the rest, the first 10 months here, I've really been focused on content development and getting our story together. The next half is really going out and evangelizing our workload story. So, I go to the various V forums.
Where do we publish our workload story? I guess that's what
So right now it's on the VMC on AWS page under solutions.
Okay.
Stay tuned because we're going to have some more updates on that.
Yep. So on VMware.com, the VMC and AWS solution, product pages have those workload
there's
conversations.
a
Right.
It's probably
Whole
under
section.
cloud.vmware.com. Right?
Exactly.
Oh, all right. It's in the cloud. That's on
Cloud.vmware.com.
Cloud.vmware.com. All right, good. And you help contribute to that. We've talked going to VMworld sessions. And then how does somebody put you on their calendar? How do you end up going to customer sites?
Customers usually have questions about workloads on VMC, and
Yeah, sales rep, account rep comes in and grabs a hold of you and drags you out to the site.
that's one way, or sales operations sends me to the various conferences to talk about this.
Do you ever get over the CB Customer Briefing Center and do pitches there as well?
Yeah, I get there sometimes.
Sometimes when customers come in, yeah. We went through the Customer Briefing Center, and when I was at Sun, I did a lot of those, right, because I was in the OS group, right? So we
Right.
would do that. I'm like, wow, I haven't had to do any of this for like 10 years now, where you're like doing briefings
Right.
with customers. I looked around, went, yep, okay, don't miss it that much, right?
I was there
so you-
yesterday.
Yeah. So you get to do briefings. You get to go to VMworlds. Any other major events? Is there industry events on cloud workload management, or is it just kind of Amazon reInvent and VMworlds?
No, we have, besides the usual suspects of, reInvent and RM VMworld,
Right.
Dell Technologies World, Oracle Open World. There's a lot of different Oracle events we show up at. We also do SQL Saturdays, which is an independent SQL event that we show up at, usually in Boston. We're at SAP. Right. We were at SAP Sapphire where I presented. We're also at SAP TechEd. So we're usually at the shows of the business critical apps. We were at Citrix Synergy. We had a presence there.
Okay.
So
any interesting, because you're here, we won't get you again for who knows how long. Any interesting tech in your space that you run into that most people would not have heard of? Because, we talk about Oracle, we talk about Microsoft and all the big guys. Anything that you would go, wow, I saw this and that these guys have potential? Because I'm looking for some stock investments, so I'm wondering, like, what do you got for me? Right.
I'm not a broker and I'm not SEC certified, but, I will admit to being a bit of an SAP fanboy. And when I was at Sapphire, the stuff that they're doing with their acquisition of Qualtrics.
Qualtrics, okay.
Yeah, so Qualtrics is this one of the applications that they purchased to go into the SAP suite where, it can look at users and say, hey, I call in to United Airlines, I missed my flight. I sent out an angry tweet before I called them because I was mad on the plane.
Right.
And they can actually measure user sentiments.
Oh, wow.
Right.
I mean, but I'm SAP is probably one of the most interesting things I've seen because just the sheer scale of what they do and how they actually drive business is just amazing, and their technology is pretty phenomenal in general. But yeah, the Qualtrics stuff has been really interesting from what I've seen so far.
Neat. Yeah, that makes sense. I do tweet when I'm angry sitting on the tarmac, and usually the airlines respond. So somebody out there is just running some grinding stuff to figure that out and then get somebody connected.
Yeah, well, in the last 20 years, I think I've flown 2.4 million air miles. So I've been stapled to an airplane seat more than I care to admit, but having sent out those tweets and been like, what's going on with this flight, they do respond. So it's always good.
Site recovery manager, high availability, all of that. Disaster recovery. So
that's a core use case.
That's a bread and butter one, right?
Yeah.
I have a specific question. Do we not get charged as long as it's just not running? Is that how that works? Or I buy the license for our products that manage that, but then the cloud services, as long as the disaster hasn't happened, I don't think I'm paying a lot of money.
No,
right?
no. I mean, we also look at 3 use cases. I mean, disaster recovery, data center extension, cloud migration. Those are the big 3. And if you look at where it's sort of like a customer journey in a way. If you want to start really small, go into DR, you get your credits with VMC on AWS, and you can start slowly. And if you want to go full throttle, you go up to a full cloud migration where you're actually migrating the business critical apps and everything else. And usually largely driven on compelling events. But DR is actually one of the big cost savers that we see with customers because they don't have to have that secondary data center
Right,
or
yeah, nothing's spun up until the disaster happens.
right, or to pick on SAP again, like an average SAP landscape has 42 systems in it, and I think about 3/4 of those are non-production. So we see dev test workloads moving up to VMC on AWS, or you see the non-prod instances moving to VMC.
The interesting part about DR for me is that you're paying essentially for space, right?
Essentially.
You have a Pilot Light installation, which is 3 hosts or 4 hosts or whatever, and you're never going to be able to get away from that.
Right.
But as you're really only renting the disk space that all your disaster recovery systems are landing on. So you might have an entire environment that spans 100, 200, 300 virtual machine hosts. As long as you're replicating to VMware Cloud on AWS, you have to get that storage to help them. But until you turn something
Right.
on that goes past those 4 hosts that you're renting, you're not paying for anything more than 4 hosts. And then
Correct.
in a DR test or a DR event, you get that 15-minute response time to flex up to
Right.
what it is you actually need for the event. It's huge cost savings are potentially there. Right?
Yep. No,
Now,
it's,
now, if you're running DR for 1 host and you have to pay for 4, then you're on the wrong side of that equation. But
Are the education services involved in this at all from a VMware perspective? Like if I want to learn, I look at the certifications I've needed to do along my VMware journey and vSphere and ESX and that. I'm wondering if I need to learn and I want to start, I can go take a hands-on lab, VMC on AWS, there's a HOL. I'm just wondering if there's structured ways to approach, getting myself ready to when this comes, right? When somebody says, okay, what are we doing? What's our workload strategy? I guess I can reach out to Drew, send him mail, go look at the website. But I'm just wondering from a VMware training perspective, is there anything yet going on there?
from a training perspective, that's something that we're looking at, but nothing currently.
Nothing currently.
it really is it's an exercise in architectural thinking, right? It's not necessarily the skills, because a lot of the skills are
The skills transfer, the workloads transfer. It's
Right.
actually a twofold thing. It's a cloud economics discussion, and then it's a workload discussion. Because really, what we see in customers, if they're in that POC phase, not to get too salesy for a minute, but if they're really thinking about making the hop, the cost is what is going to be the compelling factor to get them over the line. Plus, does it support the mission critical workloads?
Right.
I mean, and if you really look at VMware, it is truly a platform for all your mission critical workloads. And
'Cause
it's
I-
got to make cost sense.
I look at it, and maybe it's segmented by function. So Graham mentions, because he's active in the chat here, that you do need to test your DR, right? So work.
You should.
Again, how
I would encourage
it's
that.
like, what are the best practices? What do I need to know now that I'm moving it into cloud? Or is that different from what I would do in my data center?
Not a lot.
Yeah, and that's why I say maybe it's not. Maybe it's just learning how to manage the service, the function, and it doesn't really matter whether it's in the cloud or it's local.
No,
there isn't
I mean,
going to be that many.
Yeah, because
changes.
essentially, if you have a remote data center that you're doing DR to, it's essentially like going to the cloud. Really, it's the VMware Cloud Foundation of that CNS stack that allows you to do that DR. So all your operational processes are the same.
Right.
It's just you're going into VMC on AWS rather than some colo somewhere.
How does SAP change, or is it pretty much the same? I know SAP has whole consulting arms that worry about downtime, right?
Yes.
So and I guess, do they have a practice that then worries about it on AWS as well? Because now I have a different layer, right?
Right.
I have more stacks, I have more people. Now I have VMware at this layer. Now I have AWS on the hardware and services and network layer. And when something does happen, do I call my SAP team in, and do they now manage that as well? Do you see any changes there?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
Right. right? Because I always look when we went to virtualization, it complicated the debug story, right? It complicated how many layers and how many vendors I had to work with. Before it was just the operating system and the application. Now it's the virtual layer with the operating system and the application. But I ran the hardware, so I knew what I could set up, and so it was a known quantity. Now when we go into cloud, I don't run the hardware any longer. I didn't even choose the hardware. I do know what hypervisor I'm running on, and I know the application stack. Now as I get into cloud, I don't know what hardware. I also don't necessarily know the network configuration. I don't even know the voltage going into my data center any longer. I don't know anything, right? So when things go wrong, how do I know what I need to
the platform is
down?
essentially the same.
Right.
You're still on the VMware stack at that point.
Right. All right. Well, we're coming up to the bottom of the hour because we're off by half an hour. Sorry, all the guys on chat. We didn't really tweet out that we were going to start a half an hour earlier this week, but we did. We ran it from 11:30 to 12:30.
These things are just fascinating. these Kubernetes.
I'm
sorry, I've been looking at them the whole time.
The Raspberry Pis are here. We're going to give you, from being on the show, we're going to give you a OLED display, so you can take that home and run that on your Raspberry Pi. So there is a Adafruit library that lights that baby up with some examples. And on code.vmware.com, we have a website with a blog article that talks about how to write code for that. If you just basically take the example and highlight what the example has. So you
probably let my 4-year-old daughter code it up for me.
Right.
They're always better.
Any last words, John, as we come to the top of the hour? We'll do a barbecue report in a second.
No, I'm just really excited about the ideas that we've been presenting today. The idea that, there's certainly cost savings that we can look at when we're doing data center evacuations, but there's actually a security increase story, right? And there's like an end of life, technology story that we can actually support, much better in places like VMware Cloud and AWS. Fascinating. And I really appreciate that.
No, VMware, our security story is second to none. Whether you're on-prem or you're in the cloud on VMC on AWS.
Nice.
All right. Well, Drew Nielsen, thanks for being here. It is Wednesday, June 5th. Don't know if I got the date in there, but as always, always great to see people in the studio. We will attempt. Yep. What is it today? Today
the 12th.
The 12th.
John looks
it is not the 5th.
Did I miss a week?
It's the heat. It is the 102-degree heat from the parking lot. It is crazy. It is Father's Day coming up, so we are going to, do some barbecuing this week. And there's just always something to barbecue. We're going to just do a standard pork shoulder, right?
Nice.
So we're take your advice and throw something on.
Yeah, we're doing tri-tip.
Ooh, you can't go wrong
and
with
brisket.
Yeah. Tri-tip.
I run barbecue pits in my spare time.
Ooh, well, tell us. We run a little bit of barbecue report at the end of every podcast.
So usually.
So are you a wood guy, a coal guy?
I do a lot of lump charcoal smoking.
Okay.
So I have a Big Green Egg, and then a friend of mine, every 3-day weekend, he has a barbecue, and then he invites me over, and then I end up working, and everybody else ends up eating. So that's kind of my life.
What's your brisket cook story? How does that work?
Brisket is usually low and slow. Try to do 12 hours, really low. Start it the night before on the egg and just let it go. Sometimes I do apple wood chips with it.
Ooh.
Sometimes, but not a lot. Usually it's more of just. My wife has a rub that she's made that she won't tell anybody what's in it. I don't even know, but rub it, smoke it, and call it even.
Everybody always has a secret ingredient, and that secret ingredient is usually cumin.
Yeah. There you go.
Or turmeric.
All right. Drew Nielsen gives us the secret rub and low and slow. So we got that.
Yeah.
With that, we will try to be back again next week. I will be in New York, so I don't know how we're going to manage to make that work, but possibly I'll get some time to dial in and we'll get a guest. And as always, run them every Wednesday. That's our goal. It's not quality, it's quantity or something like that. And with that, we're going to go get some food and we'll talk to you guys again next week. Have a great week.
See ya.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.